There are plenty of countries around the world that are not fully recognized by everybody. Like for example, some countries recognize them, and some countries decline and say this piece of land does not belong to this country, and they don't recognize them. In this video, we want to recognize a few of them and see why some countries don't recognize other places as actual countries. One of the most famous ones is Taiwan, an island that belonged to China before they turned into a communist regime, but after the Communist Party took over Beijing, they basically separated from one another. Taiwan's actual name is basically Republic of China, and they believe they're the continuation of the actual Chinese government, and their flag is also the older Chinese Republic flag. The new flag you're seeing in China is the communist regime flag, and it's not the actual one from before. There are 15 countries that recognize Taiwan as the actual Chinese government, not the CCP. But these 15 countries are not really notable or important. We got like Vatican, Costa Rica, and Paraguay, and some other smaller islands. When you look at this map, the blue colored countries are the one that say Taiwan is the real China. The orange countries say that Taiwan is not a real state, and the green countries believe that Taiwan should be its own state, but still under China. These different ideologies has been remaining for a very long time, and it got more serious when Taiwan became one of the most important electronics hub in the world, and without them, high quality microchips cannot be made. Let's go to a situation that has not been fixed for a very long time. We made the video about the true conflict that goes back 3,700 years, but we're not here to tell you the story again. We just want to tell you how these countries are recognized in the world. Right here, we have two countries. Most countries you're seeing in the color blue recognize Israel as an actual country. But between these, there are countries that believe that Palestine is a state as well, and they believe this land should be cut into two pieces. But on this map, you see three different colors: green, orange, and pink. The orange ones say this country is Palestine. The green colored countries recognize Israel as a state, but they withdraw that. The pink countries deal with Israel, but they don't recognize it as a state, like Oman and Tunisia. The green countries are the countries that recognize Palestine as a country. Some of these countries say it should be Palestine and Israel, like China or India, but a lot of these countries say no, it should only be Palestine. Let's look at this peninsula, a peninsula that makes up North Korea and South Korea. The story of the Korean War is kind of long, but the North was influenced by the communist regime in the USSR, and the South was influenced by the US, and they started a war in the 1950s that went on for a few years. And eventually, in the year 1953, they did a ceasefire agreement, and the border was located right here, where it remains to this day. And when you cease fire, the war is still alive because they haven't signed a peace treaty. South Korea says the entire peninsula belongs to me and the capital city should be Seoul. North Korea says the same thing. This entire peninsula belongs to us and the capital city is Pyongyang. These two countries don't recognize each other whatsoever. But what about other countries? Almost every country recognized these two nations as a country, except Japan and France don't recognize North Korea as a state. But let's go look at the Middle East, specifically the Cyprus Island. Cyprus is a country, and it is recognized as such by every single country except Turkey. Since 1983, Turkey claims Northern Cyprus as its own piece of land. Nobody recognizes Northern Cyprus as a Turkish state, except Turkey itself. Let's take a look at Africa. When you look at the northwest map of Africa, you always see an empty spot called the Western Sahara, which is not a country. And even though the map is made in a way where it looks like it belongs to Morocco, it really doesn't. Until 1975, this piece of land were in Spanish hands. The Moroccans attacked and kicked the Spanish out, but the people of the Western Sahara didn't recognize Morocco as their state, and they want to be by themselves. Basically, they didn't want to be part of Morocco. And that's when a civil war breaks loose. They also gave themselves a name, Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. 39 UN members recognize Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic as a real country. Most Arab countries say this country belongs to Morocco, except Algeria, and they say this piece of land belongs to them. But the UN believes that this state does not belong to anybody, and they should remain a self-governing territory. Let's go to another Muslim nation, Kosovo. Kosovo was a part of Yugoslavia, but 30 years ago it collapses and slowly turns into different nations. One of those places is Serbia, and Kosovo and Montenegro is part of it, but this doesn't stand either. In the year 2006, Montenegro gains its independence from Serbia, and it separates. 2 years later, in 2008, Kosovo wants to separate from Serbia as well. They say they're mostly Albanians, and they're mostly Muslims, so they don't want to be a part of Serbia anymore. The blue countries you're seeing recognize Kosovo as a real country. Serbia believes that Kosovo can remain a territory of Serbia, but not a separate country. Let's move a little bit north. Romania. Greater Romania, which was here when Ceausescu was in charge, it looked like this. But after the revolution took place and Romania was not a communist nation anymore, a section of Romania gets separated and a new country is born called Moldova. But this wasn't the end of it. After a while, another part of Ukraine, which is on the side of Moldova, wanted to gain their own independence from Ukraine. A land called Transnistria. Right now this piece of land belongs to Ukraine, but Moldova believes it should be in their hand. And even though it's still a part of Ukraine's land, it mostly has Romanian and Moldovan culture and people. So they will most likely side with Romania and Moldova. There are sections in the Caucasus that a lot of countries don't recognize as real states. Like one of them is South Ossetia, and between 193 UN members, only 5 of them recognize this as a country. Russia, Syria, Nicaragua, Venezuela, and Nauru. South Ossetia is a part of Georgia, and that's the reason most countries don't recognize South Ossetia as its own country. It seems like the Russians don't want to leave Georgia alone. Another part of Georgia called Abkhazia, and the same 5 countries of the UN recognize that piece of land as its own nation, but the rest of the world declines that. After the USSR collapsed and a whole bunch of countries were made with false borders, especially in the Caucasus, there were a lot of problems. Another weird part is that Armenia is not recognized by one country, and that's not Turkey, it's actually Pakistan, which makes it extremely weird. Let's look at a country on the east side of Africa, Somaliland. Somaliland was its own country until the year 1960. But they decided to join Somalia and create one country. But 31 years later, in the year 1991, they regret their decision and they want to gain independence and become their own nation again. But it seems like the world does not agree with that whatsoever, because everybody has said no to that. If you've been paying attention to this video, you realize the more you separate, the weaker the area gets. When you look at Eastern Europe, you learn a lot. Yugoslavia, one of the strongest nations in European history, but it was separated into 7 different countries, and each of them are their own weak nation, and they basically don't thrive like they used to. But if they were all together, they would be a much stronger nation. The answer is not always to separate. What do you guys think?